The Lodgepole Mystery by Rob Bowers. Well, many years ago, I went quail hunting with my buddies, James and Dale. I took along one of my bird dogs. The dog was a pointer named Ace. Dale was one of my oldest and best friends. If you've read many of my stories, you know who Dale is. Now, James, he was older than Dale and I. James was originally from Tennessee. He fished mostly, but once in a while we could get him out hunting. My bird dog Ace was a black and white pointer. He was hyper and hard-headed like most pointers. Sometimes Ace would range out too far in front of me. I found that if I kept talking to him while he worked, he would stay in closer. Several times when hunting behind Ace, I would spend too much time talking to whoever I was hunting with, not enough time talking to Ace. I would turn my attention back to the dog just in time to see him vanish ahead or not see him at all. On this particular day, we were hunting along Lodgepole Creek. Now, Lodgepole Creek was not a long creek. The creek ran south and east, eventually joining the Cimarron River. I'd hunted this land before. And the last time I had hunted this land, I was with a buddy named Bill. Bill had a bird dog of his own, a Brittany Spaniel. I don't remember the name of Bill's dog. The dog I had that day was a female pointer I called Deuce. Bill and I bagged a lot of quail that day. Well, at least I did. Bill was doing okay, but he had a problem later in the morning. I was using a 20-gauge shotgun. Bill was using a 12-gauge shotgun. The first two covey that our dogs pointed netted us 6 birds. The next covey we jumped, I got 2 birds. Bill shot 3 times, but hit 0 birds. I thought at the time that Bill's shotgun sounded different. I shot 1 bird out of the next covey we jumped. Bill shot twice, but hit nothing. Again, I thought his shotgun sounded odd. The report from the gun wasn't as loud as it should have been. We chased down some birds from this covey, and the dogs both locked into beautiful points. Bill's dog honored Deuce's point. It was a thing of beauty. Part of the fun in quail hunting for me is watching the dogs work and point. About 6 or 7 quail burst out of cover and made Bill and I both jump. It doesn't matter how many times you do it, quail will always startle you. The dogs will always tell you they're there, but the covey rise will always surprise you. The explosion of birds with their wings thrumming, it's just exciting. I knocked down another bird. Bill shot twice and again hit nothing. This time his gun's report was way off normal. It almost sounded like a kid's pop gun. Bill and I examined his gun and his shells. Now, Bill was using some old paper shotgun shells. He said he had someone reload some for him. His shells had no shot and no powder in them. All he had in his shotgun shells was wadding. The primer was going off, but with no powder in the shells, only the pop of the primer was heard. Either the old paper shells were just too worn, or the guy he had reload them did a bad job crimping the ends. The end result was the crimps on the end of the shells had opened, and as we walked along, the shot and the powder dribbled out. Bill was effectively shooting blanks. We were shooting different gauge shotguns, so I couldn't loan him shells. That ended the hunt. On this day, Dale and James both had 12-gauge shotguns. I was using my trusty old 20-gauge pump-action shotgun. I hunted with my 20-gauge pump-action for years. Before I bought the pump, I hunted with an old Spanish 20-gauge side-by-side. It was a double-barreled shotgun my dad gave me. For many years, the old Spanish double-barrel was the only shotgun I owned. I shot that gun so much, I had to have the firing pins replaced. The gunsmith that replaced the firing pins had to make them. He told me that he used a lathe and made the firing pins from scratch. Dale, James, and I did well that morning. Ace was working well too. We knocked down about a dozen birds. Now, James was telling Dale and I about a quail hunting back in Tennessee. He remarked about how good a dog Ace was. That remark about Ace made me look around for him. Sure enough, I looked just in time to see Ace disappear around a bend in the creek. I had forgot to keep talking to the dog. I yelled at Ace. Dale whistled for him. "Where'd he go?" James asked me. "Hell, I should have kept talking to him," I said with disgust. "Now he's ranged too far ahead of us. I saw him go around a bend in the creek up there." I pointed at the spot. The creek bent off to our right at that spot. The land was high on the right. We could not see what lay beyond that point. I'd not been this far into the property. We continued to yell and whistle for Ace, but he did not reappear. "He's probably locked up on a big covey," James remarked. "He better be locked up on a covey," I said with disgust. "If we have to end the hunt and go back and we go get the truck and Ace isn't there, he's going to spend the night out here." The three of us walked to the bend in the creek where I'd last seen Ace. We walked around the bend and stopped. The creek turned to the right. Then the stream passed through a cut with higher banks on both sides, and below us was a small valley. The creek twisted through stands of trees and brush, and in the distance we could see the Cimarron River. "Nice view," James remarked as we stood looking the valley over. "It sure is," I agreed with his assessment. I don't see Ace, though. Dale gave another loud, shrill whistle. Dale was the best whistler I have ever met, and he could whistle very loud. I always wished I could whistle like Dale. "I'm not sure where this property ends," I told the guys. "I have never been this far back in here." "Look at all the plum thickets," James said. "This place should be just full of game," Dale added. The three of us started walking down into the little valley. We were on the right-hand side of the creek, and I was closest to the creek itself. As we walked, I scanned the creek bank looking for tracks. This was a habit of mine. Every living thing needs water. Tracks left along water sources was a very good way of determining what animals were in the area. I noticed the track of common animals in the area. I saw raccoon tracks and deer tracks, and the tracks left for many birds of varying sizes. We had walked maybe 100 yards when James, who was on my left, stopped. I stopped too, looking around to see what James was looking at. Something made him pull up short. I thought maybe he'd seen Ace or a deer. "That's weird," James said. "What's weird?" Dale asked him. Dale had stopped walking as well. "Those trees," James pointed his shotgun with one hand. "Which trees?" Dale asked him. "Those two trees right there," James pointed with his shotgun again. At first, I didn't see the trees James was indicating. All I saw was trees. I saw some small to medium-sized elm trees, some cedar trees, and some tamaracks. I also saw a lot of brush and plum thickets. "Those trees are upside down," James said. Now I saw the two trees James was talking about. The three of us walked closer. We walked to within 10 feet of the upside-down trees. The trees were cedars, and they were, indeed, upside down. The tops of the trees had been driven into the ground. The root balls of the trees were in the air about 7 feet high. The root balls reminded me of umbrellas. I could not tell how long the trees had been there. The trees were not fresh. The leafy green foliage of the cedars was gone, and so was the bark. The trees had obviously been wrenched out of the ground, and now the two cedar trees were rammed into the ground, tops first, about 10 feet apart. Was someone making a gate? Dale wondered aloud. Looking at the two trees, they did resemble two gate posts in a way, except for the root balls at the tops. Most of the branches along the tree trunks had been broken off near the trunk. The trees did look like they'd been placed at this spot as some sort of gateway. It was as though anyone at this spot was supposed to walk between the two trees. There was no fence anywhere close to the two trees. So why were the trees there? The only thing visible beyond was the little valley and the creek that wound its way toward the river. Somewhere down in that valley, I was sure, was my bird dog Ace. He was probably having a great time exploring and hunting for himself. The three of us moved along the creek, looking and listening for birds and my dog. I called for Ace several times, and Dale whistled for him. We moved about 200 yards from the strange upside-down trees. We rounded a bend in the creek and were stopped by a huge tangle of brush and plum thickets. The plum thickets were about 5 foot high, and the brush that mixed in and around the thickets was 6 to 7 feet high. There was no apparent way through this thicket, and on the right, the thicket extended right up to a rise in the bank about 15 feet. I could see that the bank on the right curved to the right, back in about 30 feet past where the thicket started. The plum thicket and the brush looked to be pretty solid and consistent from what I could see. Now on the left, the thicket extended right to where the creek bank dropped down about 2 feet to the level of the stream. The stream was shallow, but about 10-15 foot wide. There was a cut in the creek bank that was maybe six feet wide. Below the cut, made from the soil in the bank that had eroded, was a small sandbar. I stepped over to the cut in the creek bank. I looked down at the small sandbar. Normally, these kinds of areas are a great place to find animal tracks. Sure enough, I could see the tracks of a dog or a big coyote. Looks like Ace got himself a drink, I told Dale and James. I stepped down the cut to the sandbar. So he was here, James commented from behind me. I think so, I said over my shoulder. Looks like a big dog or coyote tracks. Some small bird tracks here too, and a big deer. A few of the deer tracks showed hawk marks behind the hoof prints. Visible hawk marks indicated a big deer. Maybe the bird tracks are from quail, Dale wondered. Well, could be, I nodded as I stood erect. I stepped up to the cut in the bank to where James and Dale were standing. There's not a very obvious way around or through all that, James remarked as he indicated the brush and the plum thickets. Well, I'm going up there, Dale announced. He pointed to the high bank on the right, and then he walked back behind us until he found a way up. I guess we can cross the creek, James told me. Yeah, I agreed, but we're going to get wet. Well, it wasn't particularly cold out. It wasn't exactly warm either. I guess the temperature would be about 45 degrees. That was a good temperature for hunting, but not for crossing creeks. Yeah, James agreed. I'm not sure I want to be traipsing around out here with wet feet. Well, I'm with you there, I agreed. I will if I need to, but I would rather not. I saw Dale above us on the high bank now. Can you see anything? I called up to him. Looks like the brush and the plum thickets go down the creek a long ways, Dale informed us. Then it all turns to the right. Looks like a big cut back to the right, and the brush mostly goes that way. The creek goes on. I can see the river, too. Can we get around or through? James asked while looking up at Dale. Dale put his thumb and his forefinger in his mouth and gave a long, shrill whistle before answering. We can get around. I saw Dale turn his head to the right, presumably at the route we would have to take to go around that big cut in the bank he told us about. But it's going to be a long walk to get around. If we check along the edge here, maybe there's a path down and through. I can't tell from here. James and I looked at each other. I guess we go up there, I said ruefully. James gave a big sigh and nodded his head. James and I started to turn back to find the way up to the higher ground Dale was on, but a shout from Dale stopped us short. Hey, Dale said loudly, I see something moving. What is it? I asked, looking up at Dale. What do you see? James asked about the same time. I can't see what it is, Dale called down to us. It's in the thicket, but it's moving your way. James and I turned to face the brush again. It's getting closer, Dale updated us. He pointed out in front of us. Maybe it's your dog coming back, James said. Or a deer, I added, but that didn't make sense. A deer wouldn't run towards us. See the brush moving? Dale called down while still pointing. James and I did see the brush moving now. We could hear it then, too. Something was definitely in the thicket and moving toward us. Sounded like it was in a hurry. We could see the tops of the brush and plum thicket moving, and we could hear the rustling noises as it moved through. I saw a brief flash of white in the thicket. Then Ace burst out of the thicket. Hey, boy, I bent at the waist and reached out with one hand to grab him. Where you been? But Ace, he wasn't having any of that. When he cleared the thicket, he broke into a dead run. Ace deftly dodged my attempts to grab him as he went by. I turned just in time to see the dog for about 2 seconds, and then he was out of sight, running back the way we had come. Even in that short time, I saw that Ace had his tail between his legs. What the hell got into him? James asked me. I don't know, I responded. He acted like something was after him. I looked up at Dale again. Did you see anything else moving from up there? Dale was looking back in the direction Ace had run. He turned and looked out over the thicket for a few seconds. Nope, Dale shook his head. Then he looked back in the direction Ace had run. Can't see the dog either. I looked at James and laid my shotgun on my shoulder. Well, damn. I sighed in resignation. I guess we better head back to the truck. Hunting quail without a dog is like picking fly shit out of pepper. James chuckled and shook his head as we started walking back. Soon Dale came down to our level, and the three of us were walking out. "What do you think is wrong with Ace?" Dale asked us. "I have no idea," I admitted. "I'd never seen him act like that." "He acted like he'd been skunked," Dale told us. "We didn't smell anything," James put in his 2 cents, "so that wasn't it." "Maybe he will be at the truck when we get there," Dale wondered. "For his sake, he'd best be at the truck," I remarked, "because if he isn't, he's going to spend the night out here." "You mean you'd leave your dog out here?" Dale asked me incredulously. "Yep," I answered him. "If he wants to run off by himself, he can stay out here, by himself." I was more than a bit mad at Ace. "I'm willing to bet that if he spends the night out here, he will want to load up in the truck tomorrow." James threw that out there. "That's exactly what I'm thinking," I said firmly. Suddenly, a cascade of dirt and gravel came off the top of the bank on our left. We all stopped and looked up at the top, which was some 12 foot high. Nothing was visible, but something had made the dirt and small rocks fall. "What was that?" Dale said as he scanned the top of the bank. "Something was right up there," James pointed a finger. "Ace!" I yelled. I was sure it was my dog. He was still going full gallop all over the property. I thought he'd run along the ridge above us, close enough to make a small avalanche of dirt and rocks tumble down the slope. But there was no sign of the dog. I fell behind my buddies a bit. I alternated between yelling for the dog and grumbling about having a bird dog that ran off. I was still grumbling when I rounded the curve in the hill and nearly walked into my buddies. Dale and James had stopped. We had come up the slope from the creek valley and back to the level where the 2 inverted trees were. "What the hell is that?" I heard James ask. I stepped up beside my buddies. "I wasn't there before," Dale said evenly. I looked, and when I saw what they saw, I agreed. The 2 inverted trees were still there, but between the 2 upside-down trees was a stick or a stake, and on that stake was a deer head. The 3 of us moved slowly forward. I had my shotgun at the ready. I looked quickly at Dale and James. They were both held their guns in the ready position as well. We moved together, side by side, like we were easing up on a bird dog who was locked in a point, waiting for the quail to explode up in a covey rise. The 3 of us walked slowly up to the inverted trees and the deer head. The deer was a doe, and it was fresh. The doe's eyes were still in place. Birds and insects always went for the eyes first when scavenging a carcass. The doe's tongue lolled out of the mouth. Blood had run down the stick or stake, and had a few drops were evident on the ground around the stake. It was indeed a fresh kill. Very fresh. It appeared as if the doe's head had been ripped off, not cut off, and planted atop the stake, which was rammed into the ground like the inverted trees. It was a gruesome signpost. To us, the intent was clear. It was a warning. Keep out, stay out, or the same could happen to you. Guys," I said slowly, "are you thinking what I'm thinking?" "If you're thinking the dog was right," James said, "then yeah, I am. Let's get the hell out of here." "Someone doesn't want us in here," Dale stated as we started walking again. Or something, I thought. We were careful to go around the deer head as we started walking towards the truck. We all 3 kept our shotguns at the ready. "I don't suppose either of you has any buckshot or slugs," I wondered aloud. "Nope," Dale answered. "Just birdshot," James confirmed. "Same here," I told them. Somehow, number 8 birdshot was small comfort. Whatever had rammed those trees into the ground and ripped off a deer's head would likely not be fazed by birdshot unless it was up close. None of us wanted whatever had done that to the doe to get that close. We made it to the truck without incident. Ace didn't get left out there. He was under the truck. He took quite a bit of coaxing to come out. He only came out when I opened the door. He was out from under the truck and in the back seat quivering in 2 seconds flat. Something had scared him badly. I didn't hunt that property the rest of the season. The next spring, a wildfire burned through the property all the way to the river. I never mentioned anything about what we saw to the landowner. But the landowner asked me a question one day. He asked me if we'd ever seen anybody else on the property. I told him no and asked why was he asking. He said he'd had several salt blocks for his cattle stolen. The blocks are put out for cattle to lick on. I told the man no, we'd not seen anyone. That was true. We had not seen anyone. But I think there was someone or something out there that did not want us there. I think that the inverted trees were put there as a warning, and when we didn't take the hint, the deer head was put between the trees. I think that my dog Ace encountered whatever put the trees and the deer head there, and it scared the dog to the point that the dog ran back to the truck. I also wonder if the same thing went by us on that ridge above us, either on its way to plant the deer head or on its way back after planting it. Ace knew more about it, if only he could talk.